get the talking segment of the afternoon started. I ask you please to stand as we acknowledge the presence of the Prime Minister and the national anthem of Barbados. Thank you. Introduced myself earlier, and for those who were not here earlier and who may not recognize the face since it's not usually seen in gatherings like these, let me reintroduce myself. I'm Dennis Johnson. I'll be the host. I said earlier it's not down to brass tacks. There is no producer, and the mute button's gone, so I'll remove the term moderator. The Prime Minister will join the President of the BCCI on stage here, and after their feature addresses, you'll be, of course, invited to engage in questions, concerns, and engage the Prime Minister. I'm going to try to give a few minutes to allow the guys to put microphones on both Ed and the Prime Minister. It's rather unusual that when you pass the exam, you get rewarded. I think that's what usually happens. Prime Minister was examined, I think, during the bruising election campaign, and having passed the exam, rather than being treated to Chifet, I think she was taken to the IMF. Those are the three most hated, the second three most hated letters in the Bajan alphabet. I think the first most hated three letters, TAX. I was going to use something else, but it's not a political campaign, so I'll refrain from using another three letters. I think TAX is the most hated three letters in the Bajan alphabet. IMF is the second. I was going to put a third as well, but I got a call from my group CEO, who's somewhere at the back of the room, and I don't think he likes me using OCM in public either. So there's another one down the list. But anyway, and in addition to being treated to a visit to the IMF, Prime Minister's second reward was 90 minutes with David Ellis. I promise I won't ask for 30 extra minutes this afternoon, ma'am. That's my promise. But she will, of course, be invited to address you, and I encourage you to engage the Prime Minister. I know she likes to be engaged, and I'm sure she is prepared well for this event. But before we get to that, I would also, I'm told it's its first address as President, so it's my pleasure to welcome and invite the Executive Vice President, General Manager, Barbados Operations of Sagicor Life Incorporated, and the President of BCCI, Mr. Ed Clark.
all I can say is, whoa, this is a crowd. Prime Minister, you need to come back every month if you can. Honorable Mia Mottley, QC, MP, Prime Minister of Barbados, Ministers of Cabinet, Members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of regional and international institutions, members of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, chairmen and reps of the BPSA, representatives of the media who are here in full force today, we thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm indeed honored to welcome you all to this very special luncheon event, sponsored by Rubis Caribbean. And today I want to recognize Mauricio Nichols, the CEO of Rubis Caribbean. Mauricio, can you please stand for their extremely generous sponsorship of this event. And Rubis has been a strong supporter of the Chamber and its activities. So thank you again. Prime Minister, we are indeed very pleased that you have agreed to address our membership and the wider private sector, and indeed wider Barbados public, because I believe this is streaming. Please allow me at the outset to take this opportunity to congratulate you and your team on the extremely successful election campaign. On behalf of the Council, staff, and members of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I wish to pledge our partnership and commitment to work with your government on the issues affecting our business community and, by extension, our country. We are cognizant that the economy is experiencing some of the most profound challenges since independence, and we welcome the fact that you have, with immediate dispatch, sought to identify and address those mission-critical areas to restore our country's economic stability. The low levels of our foreign reserves, the high levels of government expenditure, and indebtedness require swift and urgent action. We welcome your leadership and energy, which I have witnessed myself, in addressing these enormous challenges confronting our country today. We acknowledge that the measures taken in the mini-budget will require some time to determine whether they have created the desired effect across the wider economy. The intentions are, however, there for us all to see. In that regard, we look forward to our continued dialogue within the framework of the social partnership and on matters related to the following: expense reduction and restructuring of the state-owned enterprises. Maybe that's the SOE or the other three-letter word that Dennis was talking about. That is also another one. Divestment of surplus government assets. Improving how government works for its citizens and foreign investors as well. And the extremely important settlement of government arrears to the private sector. And Prime Minister, I take this opportunity to plead with you. The agriculture sector, the sugar industry, needs help as soon as possible. In addition, the restructuring of the national debt of Barbados, and very importantly, growing our economy. We look forward to hearing from you today and in the future how you intend to reposition Barbados as you continue your negotiations with the International Monetary Fund in the effort to restore Barbados' macroeconomic health. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I wish in these brief remarks today to highlight a few areas that may be of concern to some of our members and provide some insight into some of the Chamber's focus areas for 2018 as well. Taxation. Taxation is currently top of mind. It is still early days, but some of our members are very concerned that the new mini-budget measures will reduce the positive impact on prices and the overall competitiveness of our firms that was expected through the removal of the much-dreaded NSRL. Our members, however, have promised us that they will continue to monitor the impact of the new measures on their businesses over the next 3 months, and we will provide feedback to your team in that time frame. We look forward to broad consultation on the planned comprehensive tax reform, as many hard-working Barbadians continue to feel the burden of the extremely high levels of taxation in our country, while there are still many persons who form part of the growing underground economy in Barbados that are still not paying their fair share of taxes. I want to talk a bit today about legislation and some new legislation that we are really looking forward to. For us at the Chamber, the enactment and implementation of integrity legislation is the key to improving transparency and central to good governance in this country. We therefore look forward to the early enactment of the Integrity Bill with full disclosure and penalties as originally envisaged, as well as the establishment of relevant institutions set to honor the provisions of that bill. In the area of procurement, I think this is one bill that we must see as soon as possible. We seek an opportunity to provide our input on the proposed procurement legislation. I know there was a bill, I think, back in February. I don't know what has happened to it since. But our members really are seeking a level playing field for all businesses in Barbados that wish to supply goods and services to the various agencies of government. In the area of infrastructure, as we are all aware, a resilient country requires that its infrastructure must be sound and must be able to withstand natural and man-made disasters. I leave it up to you to determine what the sewage catastrophe on the South Coast was, and the poor maintenance of the Bridgetown sewage plant. Both of these underscore the impact that failure of infrastructure maintenance can have on our human, social, and economic prosperity. Government must maintain what it owns. The knock down or ignore and rebuild culture in government must be a thing of the past. We cannot afford such luxury and waste in Barbados. Prime Minister, with respect to the South Coast Sewage Project, I didn't see Minister Abrahams here today, but I wish to convey our sincere appreciation of the efforts undertaken today by the Government of Barbados. And we look forward We truly look forward to the implementation of a long-term solution, and I know you and I have had discussions along on this matter. The residents of that area and our members who operate businesses on the south coast of Barbados have suffered for far too long, and we all eagerly await a long-term solution to this problem. In the area of energy and energy efficiency, the use of renewable energy and energy-efficient products or techniques is central to the future of Barbados' development matrix and reducing this country's fuel import bill. In that regard, the member of the Chamber's Green Committee, wonderfully led by Jim Reid, eagerly look forward to working with the Ministry of Energy as it rolls out Barbados' new energy policy as our island seeks to achieve a hydrocarbon-free energy sector by 2030. I believe, Prime Minister, this is one of the statements made in your manifesto, and I know you have mentioned this to me as well. We really look forward to that. I think Barbados can do it if we put our minds to it. In the area of customs and trade facilitation, improving our performance in customs and trade facilitation also requires very urgent attention. We eagerly look forward to the full implementation of the new Assecuda World and Electronic Single Window, as this, in our opinion, will reduce the cost of doing business by significantly improving the transaction time, and in so doing, strengthen Barbados' competitiveness. At this time of the year, we all start our preparations for the disastrous hurricane season. We in Barbados have been extremely lucky in that regard. In my company at Sagicor, we have experienced the impact in Dominica, and many of you who also operate in the region have also felt the impact of such disasters. So I think we would all agree that a matter of emergency management and disaster risk reduction is an area where the public-private partnerships are essential. In this regard, the Chamber is pleased to have contributed to the national efforts to guarantee food and general supplies in the event that Barbados is hit by a natural disaster. I think we should state here that 4 of our larger distributors in Barbados who are members of the Chamber have signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, whose Deputy Chief Agricultural Officer serves as the chair of the Food and General Supplies Committee. I don't know if many Barbadians are aware of this, but there's a lot of work that that's gone on behind the scenes, and I think that you should really ask some questions about this, because we need to be prepared. We have seen the lack of preparation seriously impact many of our neighbors. We also engage in awareness building activities throughout the local business sector, and in that regard, we recently held a business continuity planning seminar and have worked closely with the DEM, SEDEMA, and the UN ISDR to ensure that our membership keeps hurricane preparedness at the top of mind during the season. Prime Minister, I want to deal a little bit with one of your pet projects. I wouldn't call it a project, but the CSME. We share your vision, that CSME that works. We must have that same vision for something that works good for Barbados. We at the Chamber believe that the CSME platform must be revitalized and shaped in a manner that can foster international competitiveness of our service providers and goods produced. Taking advantage of the CSME space is central to our strategy, and as such, we look forward to working with your office, Prime Minister, in addition to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, as well as the Ministry of Commerce and its related agencies, to ensure that we build the platforms that promote our goods and investment opportunities for our wider Barbadian private sector. I need to talk a little bit about the human capital development in Barbados, and I think underpinning our country's resilience must be efforts to increase our productivity, but especially through improved efficiency in the workplace. And this goes across private and public sector. This is not something that's just relevant to the public sector. I think many of us in the private sector feel the same. We therefore support activities that are aimed at fostering improved customer service and innovative service delivery models. We look forward to partnering with organizations such as the University of the West Indies to ensure that we put in place relevant training programs for our people to improve the service delivery and the overall output throughout the private sector, and we hope that the government sector will do likewise. Similarly, we at the Chamber believe that maintaining a healthy lifestyle is paramount to a higher level of productivity and our country's development, and therefore we commit to ourselves to implementing a program of activities aimed at building awareness of the impact of NCDs and promoting a healthier environment in our workplaces. I take this opportunity to emphasize the need for all Barbadians of all walks of life to work together to protect the health and the future of our children as we fight the rising level of childhood obesity in Barbados. It is of growing concern. It is a very serious issue. I'm very happy to say that Professor Sir Trevor Hassel has kindly agreed to chair a subcommittee of the BCCI to lead our charge in this area. And we also look forward to government's participation at the UN high-level meeting on NCDs in New York in September. We really hope that the government is very well represented there. Prime Minister, the transformation of Bridgetown and Speightstown into what we deem to be smart, modern, resilient cities, which retain their historical and cultural character still, in our view, will not only add value to our tourism product, but it would also attract Barbadians to consume goods and services in our revitalized commercial centers. For the last 3 years at the Independence Ceremony, Lighting Ceremony, I think I've brought up the revitalization of Bridgetown and my vision of Bridgetown in 2030. I look forward to that someday. Hopefully I'll be alive in 2030. As you are aware, the Chamber has always been at the forefront in seeking to revitalize Bridgetown. Mr. Lalu Vaswani, Mr. Eddie Abed are paramount in this drive, and we continue to fight it, we continue to work on it. And we have taken the decision to establish a special projects committee within the Chamber to focus on these two main cities. In this regard, we look forward to working with the relevant ministries in making this vision a reality for Barbados. There are a number of other areas that the Chamber is focusing on, and we will communicate many of these to you through the regular communication channels. But I think Carlos Wharton, who is our ED, and the members of the Secretariat, they've been doing a lot of work trying to integrate with other chambers across the region, and not only regionally but internationally. Only this morning I received an invitation from members of the private sector of Barbados to attend a conference in Dubai in November. So you can see we are being widely recognized across the region, and Carlos has done a lot of work in that area. So Carlos, thank you. There's one bad point I have to raise today. Unfortunately, I must comment on the recent lawless, gun-related, and violent incidents across Barbados by some element of our youth. These actions continue to erode the core values of our society, and they threaten to undermine the lives of all of our people. These Wild West-type activities, if not stopped immediately, will negatively impact the economic gains that we have achieved through our cultural events and tourism gains for all of Barbados. Barbadians on a whole are extremely concerned about the trend, and there needs to be a comprehensive strategy to have illegal guns removed from our streets in Barbados. This is a must-do. It must happen. We ask that the community policing be expanded so that our police force can work closely with the communities and continuously monitor the known hotspots across the island and the events across the island, especially at this crop over season, Prime Minister. The last thing we want is people staying away from the cultural events at this very happy time for us. I would say, however, there's a bigger issue at hand. We are losing a generation of young males. And now, unfortunately, there seems to be a growing number of females joining this group. I say to all of us here today, we can do better, and we must do better as a society to ensure that we provide opportunities for our youth to be gainfully involved in some activity for the betterment of our country. We cannot afford to allow the present to become the future. Sorry. In wrapping up, Prime Minister, I would say that in the first 8 weeks of your government, we have noticed a significant improvement in the responsiveness of some of the government agencies that we work with. It has been a breath of fresh air. To all involved, it stems from leadership. Good, strong leadership. Lead by example. Clearly define what is required of each and every one on the team. And we look forward to continuous improvement in this area. There's still a lot of work to be done. Barbadians are, however, expecting a high level of accountability to be associated with the responsibility that has been given to both our elected and our appointed officials. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you, Prime Minister, for agreeing to join us today. As you can see, this is, I think, probably the largest turnout we have ever had at a luncheon. And each and every one of us is looking forward to your very promising remarks, we hope, today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, President Ed. Can we have another round of appreciation for the President's remarks? I thought they were well delivered and timely. I'd like to join President Ed in underscoring the importance of communication as the way forward. I think one of the hallmarks of the new administration has been the willingness and the ability of the Prime Minister to engage and to respond to the concerns of our citizens. I take particular note of the response to the concerns raised by some Barbadians about some of the anomalies associated with the change in the administration of road tax. It was raised on the other hat that I wear. I'm not going to mention it again. And there were people finding all sorts of ways to ask about how can we and how should we. The response was there. It was immediate, given the Prime Minister's other pressing schedules, and I'm sure there are other things that will crop up from time to time. But the importance of communication, I think, is one that must be acknowledged. There has been, I think the term everyone uses is paradigm shift, so I'll use it as well, in the way in which we communicate with our elected officials. We look forward to more of the same. The Honourable Mia Amor Mottley, QC MP, was sworn in as the first female Prime Minister and the 8th Prime Minister of Barbados on the 25th of May by Her Excellency Dame Sandra Mason. In the May 24th general election, Ms. Mottley led the Barbados Labour Party to a clean sweep, all 30 seats in the lower house, securing the largest majority in the history of general elections in Barbados. She is still currently the Member of Parliament for the St. Michael North East constituency. Between 1994 and 2001, as Minister of Education, Youth Affairs and Culture, Ms. Mottley championed arguably the most far-reaching education reform program, established a youth entrepreneurship scheme and a national youth development program. In 2001, she became Barbados' first female Attorney General and assumed the chairmanship of the Regional Preparatory Committee on the establishment of the Caribbean Court of Justice. In 2003, Ms. Mottley was appointed Deputy Prime Minister. She embraced new responsibilities in 2004 as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economic Affairs and Development. A notable highlight of her tenure in this role was her stewardship in the lead-up to Cricket World Cup 2007 with the establishment of the CARICOM visa, the Joint Regional Communication Center, which saw the introduction of advanced passenger information systems, and the implementation of the Security Assurance Assistance Treaty. Prime Minister Mottley now leads a 26-member cabinet and has embraced and embarked on a focused effort to tackle the challenges facing Barbados, adopting the consultative approach in this matter. She now serves as the lead Prime Minister on the issue of the single market and economy and the quasi-cabinet of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM. It's a tough assignment. It's, I think, an exhausting assignment. One of the things I think the Prime Minister has impressed most of us who've been around her for any period of time with is her ability to become immersed in whatever she has been assigned and to bring a boundless energy to it. I'm a little bit, and I was a little bit cautious in accepting the responsibility of introducing her, because the last time I stood at a forum like this and introduced her, she was then the Attorney General. And after our engagement, the public has to be asked to lay off her for a while and cease and desist. I don't think it will happen again today. I am sure in her new role as Prime Minister, she comes ably prepared for whatever the challenges ahead are for Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's welcome to the podium the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley.
Thank you very much, Dennis, Ed, members of the Chamber. Mr. President, I understand that this is your first luncheon as well. I'd like to say that it is my first lunch at the Chamber. I can only say that it is my first lunch at Sherburne, that's Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center at the Chamber, and in this position. But this is a welcome opportunity to meet again and to see friends and hopefully to make new friends, but against the background of a single mission that I can only ask you to leave reflecting upon, that together we must and together we shall. And that is why I've come here this afternoon. I have noticed that you've put an additional bounty on my head, having, I'm told, increased the price significantly for today's participation. I trust that this will not speak of future events with respect to the goods and services that many of you are responsible for in purveying to the people of Barbados. But nevertheless, the truth is that I'm glad to be back. And when I was last with you, last year in November, some made a lot of do about the fact that I said that one way or the other, I wouldn't be speaking in that position anymore. And it was more out of a sense of frustration, because how many times can you keep saying the same thing over and over and over and over? In January last year, there was a letter that was made public that was written by the then central bank governor to the government, the Ministry of Finance, that indicated that action was absolutely urgent. I believe the date was January 26, 2017. The only thing that became urgent then was his dismissal. And what remained undone for effectively 18 months. 18 months. And when we inherited a government after an unprecedented interval, and some may argue that that unprecedented interval aided our numbers, and if it did, I can recommend the virtues of patience and resolve. But after that unprecedented interval, we have inherited a government that effectively was in ICU. How do you stop the bleeding? How do you reposition the government to be able to even have the operation that it needs to have? Because you can't get recovery without the operation. And you can't have the operation unless you stop the bleeding. We took an approach that effectively said two things. We need to take control of our debt situation because our debt is unsustainable. It's not a question of liquidity anymore. It's a question of solvency. Barbados was the third most indebted country in the world, and that was triggered not just by an appreciation of the formal debt figures that were being released, but also by the significant arrears that we discovered, because as you, members of the private sector, knew, arrears, the accumulation of arrears was being used as a form of adversarial financing. Secondly, our foreign exchange situation was perilous. And it was perilous because not only was the amount that we had declining significantly for the last 9 months before the election, again, because it had been doing so 2013, 14, 15, but it was against the background that serious foreign debt payments were due in June. Oil prices were rising again, and we were, as Ed reminded us, on the verge, effectively, of the hurricane season. That we learned as children is no longer applicable from June too soon to October all over. That no longer describes the behavior of the hurricanes in modern day 21st century. Some may say it is a completely new world. And against that background, we understood that the risks that we were taking were too significant for us not to take action and not to request balance of payment support from the International Monetary Fund. Like Ed, I recognize that those three letters are not among the most popular letters in the Barbadian lexicon. I thought that he was going to say that the 3 worst letters was B-R-A, but then I realized he preferred to say T-A-X. I thought that he might even have gone higher up in the alphabet and wanted to talk about another LP. But then I realized records are no longer the order of the day and only CDs. Suffice it to say that we made decisions not because we want to, but because we felt we needed to. And anybody who understands how to manage a significant medical condition knows that pain comes invariably before gain. And this is where we find ourselves. So where are we today? I'm not going to spend a lot of today recapping the mini budget. You know it. You've heard it. Is it perfect? No, it isn't. Was it absolutely necessary to stop bleeding? Yes. What were our enemies as we saw them upon ascending into the reins of office? Time and credibility. Time and credibility. Barbados government, for the reasons I just outlined, did not have time on its side. And credibility, nobody, not even the people in Barbados, were beginning to believe the word of the government of Barbados anymore. And worse still, those with whom we would have had to have dealt with outside. Have we been able to achieve the objectives in terms of stopping the bleeding and getting the benefit of the doubt with respect to having persons treat to our word with credibility that we believe it deserves? Yes, we have. And I want to publicly thank a range of people before I get into the substance of my speech. Because you can't get here on your own. You get here with the goodwill and the help of people. And that was the fundamental mistake made by the last government, that they ignored the good people of Barbados, of the region, and of the world to help a country out of a difficult circumstance. And let me start by first thanking the social partnership of Barbados. And I say so with all sincerity. This building has come to be almost like home to some of us, upstairs predominantly. And the amount of hours that we have spent talking, thrashing out, agreeing, disagreeing, but ultimately moving in the same direction by first and foremost identifying, as we did on that first morning of the 28th of May, what are we in here to do? Do we all agree that we must save the value of the Barbados dollar at all costs? The answer to a man and a woman was yes. Do we all agree that there are different routes by which we can do it, and we set them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we asked everybody, once they agreed that, to be able to sit down and to write out what they believe to be their first priorities along each route. And we all did that. And by coming back by the Friday, we started the process of the heavy lifting that allowed us to get first and foremost to the mini budget. And we are yet again engaged now in another set of heavy lifting, to which I will come back. I'd like to thank my team. And you know, much has been said about the size of my cabinet and advisors, but I, from the very beginning, said many hands make light work. Barbados has a unique condition where almost every aspect of social and economic activity was affected in this country, from the protracted and delayed lack of action by the last government. Sound funny? We identified 17 mission critical areas, And we didn't do more because the cost of printing was too high. Fact. We didn't put in CARICOM. We didn't put in LIAT. A matter that will engage us with seriousness very shortly, both in terms of a supplementary to the Parliament of Barbados and in terms of us discussing more fundamental structural issues of the airline. And a shareholders meeting will soon be had for us to deal with it. We didn't put in CSME, as I said, against the background of the Golden Report, and I'm happy to report that having come out of CARICOM, there's a renewed commitment to the CSME, and we were able to sign the protocol on contingent rights, and the protocol on government procurement is literally going to be signed, we hope, before the end of the year, plus a built-in agenda on integrated capital markets and securities, common community policy, new financial services architecture, and a few other things that we have as a common framework for us to achieve between now and the next year. We didn't put in the Barbados Pharmaceutical Service and the commitments given by the last government to remove a whole range of drugs off of it, which will have implications for other people, and we can't change it overnight because contracts have already been given. And the Minister of Health will speak to those things. But what we did realize was that we needed many people to do and deal with these issues on a parallel track. So I want to thank all who have been working, from the central bank governor to the advisors to the members of cabinet to the public servants, in particular in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, who have been doing the heavy lifting and working hours 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and even on the weekend before the IMF missions till 1 and 2 o'clock at Central Bank. I want to thank the international community. When I spoke to Madame Lagarde 1 week after being elected, she immediately responded when we indicated what we would be doing upstairs here on the Friday. She immediately responded by speaking within 1 hour of us announcing that we regrettably had to suspend debt payments, and 2, that we were approaching the IMF. She didn't send the mission chief to speak. She didn't send an institutional head to speak. She issued a statement. And equally, within 72 hours, the first IMF fact-finding mission was on the ground. Once we did the mini-budget, and remember I said our 2 enemies were time and credibility. And immediately upon realizing that the government of Barbados was serious and not posturing, or as Trinidadians would say, making as if, we immediately had a meeting with her the day after the budget debate finished, and within less than a week, 9 days, the IMF mission was back on the ground. Less than a week after meeting with her, President Moreno, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, on whom we will have to rely for a lot of our development funding, and in the absence of international capital market access for the next few years, was also on the ground to pledge his total and complete support for the work of the government of Barbados as we go forward. I don't know of how many other new governments within less than a month in office would have had the engagement and support of the head of the International Monetary Fund and the head of the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as our development partners, in the way in which we have had. And I want publicly to thank them and to say to Barbados, there is merit ultimately in a good name, because in spite of the activities of the last, I don't want to say decade because you can think of being political, but it is decade, that our good name has literally allowed us to receive the benefit of the doubt, but it had to be anchored with concrete action, which could only have been taken with your help in the social partnership. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I felt it necessary to detail these things and to do this public thanking because the mission is not over. Far from over. And the continued cooperation is absolutely essential if we are to get where we need to get. And that's why today's theme is Together We Must, Together We Shall. The bottom line is that we have put measures in place in the mini budget which are under review. They're not perfect, but what they do is allow government to be able to close that significant gap, both with respect to its deficit and ultimately to being able to achieve a primary surplus, because we have to work ultimately to bring our debt down because, as I said, it's not only a liquidity issue, it is a solvency issue. We took the approach that in the first 3 months we would focus on those entities that could assist us with cost recovery or that could be better delivered elsewhere with a dedicated source of finance. And who best to start it and do it but the tourism sector that has been in the business of managing its own affairs for over 60 years in this country. It is a mature sector by any definition. And we believe that the public-private approach to the delivery and management of our tourism services is the way to go. I thank the members of the leadership of that sector for also recognizing the wisdom in this approach. Will there be teething problems? Yes, there will be. But can we do it? Of course we can do it. And we have a situation where the government has recognized that in the initial stages, we need to give you a dedicated source of funding, as has been there for us. But we recognize that marketing has at its core an entrepreneurial spirit, and that we expect, therefore, that over the course of time, the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. must become entrepreneurial in its approach to the marketing of tourism and must be able also to secure some of its own funding to help do the job. We trust and pray that we can immediately look to other entities to have a similar public-private partnership approach in our productive sectors. But we are conscious that many of them don't have the same depth and maturity as the tourism sector, and therefore the process for engaging with them will take a little longer than it will with the tourism sector that has that maturity. We also took the determination that sewage was affecting everybody, not just those on the South Coast. Barbados had 4 international advisories on sewage affecting the South Coast. Now, if you don't know Barbados, you don't know South from West, from East from North. You hear Barbados. There are those who don't know Barbados from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from St. Lucia. And therefore, we recognize that the only sustainable way to be able to deal with some of these issues is by making many hands make light work. Most of you who don't live on the South Coast and don't live in Bridgetown would be unaware of the fact that both households and businesses in those 2 areas have been paying a sewage connection fee for over a decade. Problem was that the base was too small. Now what we have done is that we have said everybody pay $1.50 a day in households, because we are taking responsibility for people's education and people's health care from you. But we cannot take responsibility for everything. So everybody contribute $1.50 per household, not per person. Those pensioners who live alone, or those families who are indigent, come and see us. And then secondly, we had to find a mechanism to allow for businesses with respect to the contribution. We settled on a 50% rate of the water bill, recognizing that before there was a 2/3 rate of the water bill for all businesses connected to the sewage system in Bridgetown and on the South Coast. But we went further, and when I addressed your sister organization, the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, we're conscious that there are going to be some entities in the tourism sector and in the farming sector and hairdressers and other categories that might be pushed beyond their limits, one or two manufacturers, because they use more water than others. And we have agreed in principle that once the bills start to come out and we see where the profiling is going, because I have not hid by admitting to you that the data at the Water Authority is not in good condition. It's not. So we actually need to see what goes out in order to be able to make those judgments. And up to yesterday, we met with the General Manager of the Water Authority, and I've asked that in the same way we are bringing the legislation for the Relief Committee that will act in the same way that the Land Tax Relief Board does for land tax, that we will also need to see the profiling on those sectors such that we can settle on the appropriate cap that will be applied with respect to the garbage and sewage collection fee. I said it to the Hotel Association, I repeat it to you, and once those figures are available, we will then be in a position to set the appropriate cap, because we, like you, do not want to see people overtaxed or incapable of meeting their commitments. We understand that if you don't spend money in your own personal way, and if your businesses don't have the money to be able to reinvest, there's no growth. And there is no way out of this situation without growth. Governments don't grow. It's households and businesses whose spending grow. And to that extent, therefore, we are conscious that our role is not only about tax and spend. That's what informed most of Barbados' development in the last 52 years. But we've reached a stage now where we have to sit up or stand up and acknowledge the other powers that a government has to fuel growth in the country. And this is nothing new. And I ask for you to recognize that we have sought to be consistent. In May 2016, on page 26 of the Covenant of Hope, we set out for you our approach to fiscal governance. It is not going to change. And what is that approach? That first and foremost, to the extent that we are spending within the context of government's budget, the first claim, Ed, you'll be happy to hear, is on law and order. Without law and order, your investments will come to naught. And we are conscious that Barbados can withstand many things, but it cannot withstand an explosion in gun violence, automatic guns, and it cannot withstand hurricanes and earthquakes. So we start first by humbling ourselves and knowing what we cannot withstand. Pursuant to that, and without going into details at all, I'm happy to report to you that the National Security Council met yesterday during lunchtime, instead of us having lunch, with the Attorney General, myself, and the Minister of Home Affairs, meeting with the Commissioner of Police, the Control of Customs, and the other relevant officials. Our role is not to be operational, but our role is to ensure that the resources and the cooperation are there, and we are satisfied that there are things that have to be done. In the budget, we spoke about the need to reduce the backlog, and we made resources available, which will be operational, I'm told, by September, even in the absence of a functioning court space in the main court building as that is repaired. Why? Barbados cannot have 10,000 cases in a backlog. But realistically, we can't treat the 10,000 at once either. But what we can treat to is all the murder cases and all the cases of shooting with intent, and then come down the hierarchy with rape, burglary, and robbery, or robbery, rape, burglary. We've committed to that. And we've also committed to having every case from July 1st last year heard expeditiously, and then having every new case heard within 6 to 9 months in this country in those 4 or 5 categories that I just referred to. People will not play with you if they know they are going to face sanctions quickly and urgently. And therefore, the consequences of having bail available to persons on serious charges becomes less of an issue because there will be quick hearings. And this notion of people walking about who have been charged with the most serious cases and walking about for 2, 3, 4 years hopefully will be put behind us. But separately from that, we have also to recognize that technology is what is going to help us deconstruct and reconstruct government. We've committed to ask some basic questions. And on Monday gone, on this very platform, we started the process with the town planning legislation and public sector consultation, the private and the public planners all being involved. And next Wednesday we come back here with members of the public and the business community, contractors, to continue the consultation. A 1965 piece of legislation, as much as I like to feel I'm young, I was born in 65, and that legislation cannot govern the affairs of this country as we move close to the 3rd decade of the 21st century. Similarly, water zoning settled in 1965-66 cannot do it. And therefore we will use the non-traditional powers to be able to help fuel growth. Because when you finish going down the hierarchy of claims, law and order, public health, health care, education and protection of the vulnerable, protection of public spaces, gullies, roads, beaches, foreign policy, productive sector support, and foreign policy and foreign trade support, you then come to what are your other powers? Because what we do know is that the government of Barbados can't do all of those things. That's what the last 15 years has taught us. And that we then under-provision the hospital by 40, 50 million for the last 12 years. So you have an accumulated deficit of $500 million, and then you understand all of a sudden why the hospital is now in the state in which it is in, and why 40% of that amount is owed to BRA, to NIS, and to many of you. Can't do it. So, what are the other powers? Legislation. Tom Adams, in passing the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, fueled millions of dollars in economic activity in this country. All he did was to pass a piece of legislation. When we talk about reclaiming peninsulas and islands, as we hope to, subject to the environmental scoping study coming back in the next 6 months positive, we will do so without adding a cent to public debt, because we are not using anything other than legislation buttressed by public procurement to make that a reality. Facilitation and regulation. How we use those powers will make a difference to how you spend your money. And your constant refrain, as is ours, about the ease of doing business has to be addressed not just in town planning and immigration, but in every other aspect of government's life. We don't need to run registries. We need to make sure that registries function. Last night I reviewed the numbers yet again in preparation for this. And cumulatively we spend about 9 or 10 million, and other than the Supreme Court registry, which we will keep, we don't need to run the rest. But we spend there 9, 10 million, so it's not only statutory boards that we must look at, or state-owned enterprises. There are other functions, and that is why the process that we started with the social partnership on Friday where we literally laid out every single transfer on major government departments and asked people to please let us know how you feel. If I knew that the crowd in here was going to be so big, I would have walked with the poll papers. But I ask you to participate because we will go public for a week electronically. Something is either essential, and I suspect that most people feel that a police force is. It's highly desirable. National Cultural Foundation, highly desirable. Some may even say essential because of our cultural psyche. Or optional. Do you need to own a public television station? Or it's optional but can be better delivered elsewhere, like the registries. Now, those comments are without prejudice to what my government will do. But I give you those examples to stimulate discussion in the country. Because this is not about the Barbados Labour Party government. This is not about the 30 people in Parliament now or the 21 senators. This is not even about the chamber in here. This is about the future development of an entire country and how it does its business. And while we have to get some things done in time to continue our discussions for the contractual loan that will come from the International Monetary Fund, because that's all the IMF program is securing funding at highly concessional rates. While some of that is critical, and to unlock then the development funding from the IDB and CDB and other institutions, we can't be driven by what is necessary for the IMF. We have to be driven by what is necessary for our own good health. None of us in here will go to the doctor, ask the doctor to check us out. The doctor tells us you have X condition which is critical, but you know you're also suffering from Y and Z. And you focus on X and don't focus on Y and Z too. Your head would need checking. Similarly, the country. We are at that unique point. And maybe we had to go as deep as we did to get where we are. But what we have is the capacity to build a singular purpose and resolve as a nation to achieve that which others did not get achieved before. Barbados is suffering from a hardening of the arteries that is life-threatening, a calcification. The room left to move through has so narrowed, and we can just want to stop eating pigtail and don't want to exercise. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. So the approach that my government is recommending to you is a review of everything that government stands for. And people need not get frightened, because the covenant of hope is there to let you know what we value, what we will protect to our death. We're going to protect you. Pidgins must be safe. Pidgins must have the ability to be healthy without reference to whether they have money or not, without reference to whether they can go to Sandy Crest or FMH. If you have a pain, and you got a Prime Minister who hates pain, so you know they can be there with you. Pidgins must be able to educate their children. 2/3 of the people in this room would not be here if free education was not given to us by every single leader who went before us, from Grant D. Adams right back through to the last group that stopped it. Pidgins must be able to protect the vulnerable. There's not one family in Barbados who does not have somebody who is not doing well. And they're not doing well may not be as a result of money alone. It may be as a result of some social problem. It may be as a result of some physical disability or infirmity. We have to protect those who cannot help themselves on 166 Squarepants. We have more gullies than beaches. If we don't protect our gullies, our water supply is compromised. But in any event, there are other ecological benefits to it. Our coastal economy is being threatened by the absence of reefs, reefs dying. Our roads are in the worst possible condition, and yet we have more roads per capita than almost any other country in the world. If we don't deal with those things, we are in trouble. So we have reached that point where the consultation cannot be about what the IMF wants, even if the timing is driven by the IMF. The consultation has to be about what Barbados needs. We've just come out of the 50th anniversary, and it is our duty to do for this country what those who stood at independence did for it, to secure the next decade, recognizing that if the platform for the next decade is there, then the ability for the country to soar thereafter has also been laid. And when I say, therefore, together we must and together we shall, that is what we are talking about. Do we have the luxury of time? Not to make the decisions, no. To execute? Yes, because you need time. Phase 1 was about those things we could do quickly, and the bills are coming out now. But phase 2 and 3 has to be about refocusing and restructuring those entities that we ultimately will agree upon in the next month, but taking the time to do it properly and to ensure that whether it is partnerships through divestment and workers owning as much as anyone else do, whether it is outright sale, whether it is finding a different entity to deliver the particular service, or whether it is bringing proper management and getting greater efficiency on an existing entity, it has to be done. In 1966, we had 1,900 employees, I'm told, in our state-owned enterprises. We have over 10,000 today. And part of the problem that we have in the public service, and bear with me, Barbados' competitive advantage for much of its life as an, as an independent nation came as a result of a superior public service. So we have to protect our quality of public service. We have to give our public servants opportunities to be more strategic and to receive the strategic training, not degrees alone. And yesterday I met with the Chancellor of the University of the West Indies to underscore that message. But what we can't do is to do that while trying to be all things to all people. And then we end up being nothing to anybody. And that's why we are going through this exercise for our own fitness and health, not for the IMF, but because we should have done it in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, in the last decade. Because what we have done by failing to do it is to allow calcification, everything to build up, build up, build up, build up, build up. So my friends, that brings us therefore to you. We got this. We do. And I said this, and people think it's colloquial, but I said it because we do have it. But I need you now in this room to play your part. I need you now to recognize that in the same way I am stretching ourselves, the political class and the public service class, that I need you to stretch and to come out of the temple of your familiar. I need you to recognize that we need to make sure that in the same way I've asked Senator Mcconnell and Dr. Bab and others in that ministry to literally deconstruct and reconstruct every area of government and to infuse technology in it, that I need you to do the same with your businesses. Are you applying the most efficient and effective means to be able to do what you are doing in your enterprise? Can technology help you with growth in that respect? Can you do it quicker and easier? Can it reduce costs? I look forward to seeing what the online taxation will bring for us, because I really do believe that if we get it right, it will be a more efficient means of collection. And for those who fear that we are so mad as to charge you online and at the port too when the good comes in, then it means that you don't understand that we believe in fairness. But I need you to ask yourself those questions with respect to the application of technology. I need you to take a hard look at the health of your own company and to determine whether it is appropriately capitalized or whether it is overburdened with debt, and can you make decisions that will allow you to take a different approach to recapitalization, including making decisions to offer to others in similar businesses the opportunity for strategic partnerships, or creating opportunities for equity investment to your friends and your family, or looking at forms of mezzanine financing. In our manifesto, we were very clear about the need, and the Minister of Small Business and Commerce has been given a clear mandate that he has to create regional financial advisory bureaus, less so for people in this room, but very much so for all Barbadians. You cannot have almost $9 billion in savings, and with all due respect to the banks, savings interest rates at 0.1%, and Barbadians not believing that they need to work cooperatively to be able to pool their resources to get a greater return on resources, and for businesses to move out of the category of being undercapitalized and hence not being able to invest in the health and quality of their plan. So I ask you to do your part with respect to that self-examination with respect to Capita. We need also to recognize that the days of operating in a cloistered environment will not be with us. Edu spoke about us holding the lead responsibility for the CARICOM single market and economy. It has to mean more than just going into the OECS. Guyana. And there is no ever so welcome attitude from me. It's actually the opposite. Guyana and Suriname need assistance because their population bases are limited. Barbados has to do today what Barbadians did in the 19th century with respect to Guyana. Reach out and go in there. Barbadians have to do with Suriname what we did with Guyana, recognizing that the language barrier is not as real a barrier today as it would have been 50 years ago. Apart from anything else, anything is capable of interpretation on a phone now. But more importantly, most Surinamese speak English in business and in government. And I'm happy to report that as of Monday, the bilaterals that we had with Guyana and Suriname, up to Monday I spoke to the president of Suriname again, and tomorrow I speak back to him to advise him of a high-level team, public-private team, and I thank Mr. Herbert for helping me with that in that respect, that will go to Suriname to begin to identify the opportunities such that at a higher level we will be able to concretize it. And we want to do the same with Guyana. But it's not only Suriname and Guyana, Bahamas. How many Barbadians enterprises going to the Bahamas? May not be part of the CSME, but it's part of CARICOM. And how many of us have gone into Panama? Minister Simmons came back yesterday on a flight on COPA. And what COPA does is to literally open up southwestern United States of America in a way that it has not been opened up before. I need to say to the country, and I'll finish soon because I'm conscious of time, that the ministries of foreign affairs and economic affairs take on a new relevance in this environment where we have no access to the international capital markets for the next 2-3 years. We're going to have a more aggressive approach diplomatically, and we're going to have a more aggressive approach with respect to bilateral and technical cooperation through economic affairs. But I need you to be next to us, because when we do those things and when we start to open up those opportunities, there must be a Bajan on the front line walking with us. And even if that Bajan then partners with others from the region or outside of the region, the core is that we either are going to expand existing businesses or we're going to create new businesses. Together we must. Together we shall. And I ask you to recognize that in the same way we are going to invest in massive training. You're right, Ed. We lost too many of our young people who for the last 6 or 8 years left secondary school and have never held down a job. And that's why my government is committed to something called a National First Job Initiative. Because people must get into the discipline of what it is to go to work, to wake up in the morning, to go and bathe, to get ready, to take a bus or to get a car and to go to work. If you don't have that discipline between 18 and 30, you think you will get it after 30? And I'm asking you in the private sector to work with us to create those opportunities for apprenticeships, for first job initiatives. And I'm asking the young people, and I'll talk to them, because the only body who starts at the top is a grave digger. And this is the kind of conversation that a mature country has at 52. So that when we do these things, we need to retrain our youngsters in areas of activity that matter. The Director of Finance pointed out to the Chancellor yesterday that we have all of these Barbadians studying banking and finance at the university, but the bank's only probably taking how many people a year in jobs? So you train in hundreds, and the bank's taking less than 100 a year, if so much. Makes no sense. So what have we done? We've made some early decisions. Yesterday, the Minister of Education and the Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation and ourselves met with representatives of a leading charitable entity and a young Barbadian who is doing wonders overseas in technology. We've agreed that we will start technology training in coding and broad technology and cybersecurity. And here are the 4 groups. Early childhood levels in nursery, 9 to 11, 14 to 16, and post-secondary. So that over a 3 to 4 year period, you then have it in every possible age cohort. And that we will do so first by identifying a derelict IDC building and making it available to the charity so that they can help us refurbish it, make it available, and then work between that and the school system for integration into schools and to roll it out over a period of time for a select number of schools until ultimately it can become universal. We've also been in contact with Google and others to be able to come and do their own coding camps. Because when we create these citizens, they must be global in terms of their capacity to find jobs. And it's not just in technology, it's in something like nursing. There's a global shortage of nurses. How many young women in Barbados are sitting down now without a job? And we have to expand the training in order to be able to give those opportunities. So my friends, I'm asking you, we will do what we have to do. But I want you to do those few things. Not to be afraid to move outside of these borders into non-traditional markets, particularly Suriname, Guyana, Panama, Florida, Bahamas. Not just the OECS or Trinidad and Jamaica where we have a little comfort level. Goddard's and others have done it already. Latin America. Others need to do it as well. I'm asking you to review your technological platform. I want to be able to restructure government so that the IDC once again can have the special technical assistance program that helped over 500 enterprises by giving people access to working capital and marketing. But we can't do that if we're trying to be all things to all people. I want you to be able to also work with the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation with respect to reviewing your technological platforms. And I want you ultimately to help me find a better use for the savings of the Barbadian people. We will do our part by requiring that those things in which there is a special fiat or benefit being conferred from government through licensing or through access to land or limited resources that others have not benefited from, that we will require people to open up participation to the public to the tune of 25 to 30% minimum with respect to opportunities for either equity investment or mezzanine investment. But we need you to also not play so, but to recognize that you got to do so. You have to have an open approach to the development of your enterprises. Countries and businesses invariably that have an open approach will survive and not atrophy. So, shall we? Shall we? Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I think you've been certainly energized, and hopefully lunch has been sustaining enough for you to engage in the next part of this event, which is going to allow you to engage with Prime Minister, a question and answer session. There are microphones placed strategically for you. I am told they're reserving the first question for me. I'm not quite sure why. I thought she would have been questioned enough by members of my team, but I'm told the first one is reserved for me, so I'll have a seat with the Prime Minister and take advantage of that while I give you the opportunity to make your way to the various microphones or to get close to it so you can follow up with questions. I don't plan to ask all the questions. As I said earlier, the dump button is not in my hand today, so I won't cut you off either. I can promise you that. So, make the microphones your friend, get your questions together, and hopefully we'll have an engaging session from here. Have you been mic'd? Right, I switch mics and switch chairs just to make sure the Prime Minister is mic'd. Just to refer to a couple of things you said, Prime Minister, and I was particularly interested in your last comments about the banking sector, because that's one of the things I flagged. But I want to start with the question of the foreign reserves, because one of the first things you said was that we have to stop the hemorrhage. Where are we today with our foreign reserves?
Mercifully, our reserves have held. Obviously, they have, because once we did not pay the major foreign debt in June, we've literally been able to protect it. And there's actually been a marginal improvement. I'd like to feel that that's because confidence is still getting better and better. But there won't be any serious change until we can literally get the liquidity support to give us the time to get. There's a whole set of projects that are actually ready. There's a whole set of projects that are actually ready for execution or soon thereafter, and I have the confidence that those more than 20 or so projects will bring significant activity into the country. There are one or two major ones that we're not yet ready to announce, but I think that I will only say it's better to be born lucky than to be born rich.
The other question I want to ask on the issue of the foreign reserves is there an overall plan for the sustainability of our foreign reserves? Because we've depended a lot in the past on either borrowing or major projects from time to time.
Dennis, and that's what we're trying to do with the restructuring of how we repurpose tourism. We also have to save, and perhaps I can tell you that I've asked, and the social partnership knows of one, the other one they don't know of yet, but I've asked that we have a national task force on cruise tourism, because Barbados is cruise tourism, and I hope the minister, I see him in here, will speak to the country in greater detail soon. Our discussions with the cruise industry show that there's still opportunity, but Barbados has literally dropped down significantly. Our capital city is not clean, it's not attractive. Our ability to be able to handle air-to-sea transfers is way below what it should be. We're going to have to work cooperatively with a sister jurisdiction if we want to be able to do more home porting in a serious way. We have to look at our capacity also within the pier, and that's why those contracts have to be dealt with. That will reflect. We have 2 commitments to do the same thing. So that's one, and that will help us. We are also not getting from cruise passengers the level of spend that other jurisdictions are getting if we did nothing but just go to the highest in the region spend, which is in St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands. We would earn almost $100 more per passenger for the 880,000 passengers that we're getting when the year comes. And that's 80 million Barbados will make, is actually more than that, will make a significant difference. But what is happening is that people come off the ship and within 2 hours they're back on. Now that's the worst possible experience for us to be giving people. It's better that they don't come at all. So we need to be able to get attractions going that are wow attractions. We need to have a national approach to how we treat one another and to treat our visitors. And I've asked that we have literally a national public education program. When we were kids and you went into the supermarket, you used to see those posters up, and then you used to have all these public ads, PSAs about how to deal with one another and to treat people. We need to do it again. And we need to use the people who communicate to the different sectors of our society to do it, and not believe that a prime minister or a minister or a CEO can do it. It has to be a completely different approach. With respect to the other national task force that we're going to have to put in place, is one on the 2030 target for fossil fuels, free environment. And that's going to be critical because that's not going to be achieved by government acting alone. It has to be achieved in a cooperative way across the society, and it has major implications for how we do things at this point in time. But if we can do that, right now we import in oil alone, what? Clyde, is about 600, 700 million with prices going back up a year. So that's foreign exchange that can be saved. So we have to earn more and we have to save more. And at the same time, we have to recognize that there are some sectors that are on the front line of attack, like the international business sector, international business and financial services sector. I had a long conversation with the special envoy in that sector, Ben Arundel, before coming here today, a 1-hour conversation, and their report should be with us in less than 2 weeks' time. And separate from that, we've agreed within CARICOM that we have to have a cooperative approach towards the issue of lobbying, and also a diplomatic strategy that we've just not had. The OECD is the one giving us trouble on it. What is it that the reason that's underpinning it? And who are the people within the OECD, and are they really getting what our issues are? And to what extent will it compromise our capacity to function? Now for this, people just see it as esoteric. But if we don't get this right, Bajans have to pay more taxes. If we don't get this right, some of the things that we want to do will have to be cut. International business sector, when we left government in 2007, was paying $365 million out of $520 million in corporation tax pay. So that's why I have, and Minister Toppin, who is a past master at highly technical issues. He was the one who did for us the Fair Trading Commission, the Consumer Complaints Tribunal, utilities regulation. You need somebody who is well-gripped, well-versed in being able to handle highly technical issues, and I'm satisfied that him, along with Ben Arundel and Francoise Hendes and a number of other people, can help reposition us in that. But we're going to have to work cooperatively with the others in CARICOM too.
Okay. Recognize Mr. Vashwani.
Madam Prime Minister, honored to address you.
Thank you.
I have a question and a few theme comments to make. We acknowledge expeditious is perhaps not the adjective we're looking for. The expeditious way that you have gone about all the various issues, mission critical and others. So it's hard to put others to you, but I'd like to just share a few which I think could complement what you're trying to achieve. In terms of job sustainability and job development, growth, as well as getting economic activity to spur. I think you'd be aware that underpinning the legislation called the Special Development Areas Act are two key principles. One, that just because you have an investment doesn't mean you qualify for a benefit. But if you're willing to put that investment or enhance that investment in an area where there's a low return on investment, the government will give you certain concessions to make it a little shorter time to get your return. In the same way, there was a Section 12E of the Income Tax Act, which benefited the revitalization of Bridgetown. It used to be 150% of tax benefit for what you invest. And it was removed about 2 years ago. We believe that providing incentives are a form of a catalyst. And secondly, once some people take the first step, the person next door to him or nearby gets motivated and starts their process. Not everybody will be first out of the blocks. So I'd like to suggest that some what you call simple things that can be done through legislation that doesn't necessarily cost you. Because even if it was 300% and nobody is using it, it's not costing you anything. But yet if you were to get that stimulus of investment, your corporation tax, your VAT, your national insurance collections would grow. And the Chamber of Commerce, as you know, has spearheaded, since 2008 in particular, the drive for revitalization of Bridgetown. And in 2010, when they did a survey, there were 1,992 businesses and approximately 10,000 employees. And a few years after, that declined. I don't like to say the number, but it declined. You have a critical mass that can be stimulated. You have a lot of businesses running on idle. And with the right incentives, and I know you're busy with a lot of things, but I'd like to make it that with the right incentives, businesses can do something. If there was something to sustain job levels or to increase it by X% in a way that it can be measured and monitored, it could have a very positive impact. Secondly, another function of investment and rate of return is cost of capital. You have recently removed the NSRL tax, for example, and what is your first expectation? We want to see how quickly the prices of goods and services can be reduced that were impacted by NSRL. Fair comment. Yet, over a year ago, the minimum savings rate requirement was removed by the central bank upon the banking sector. May I ask you to check and get back to us when you can? What reduction in the cost of capital has there been relative to the 350 or 360 basis points reduction in the cost of capital? I say this because everything has a value. If the cost of capital can come down, the rate of return approach can be enhanced. So I believe that the question is, would you be willing to look at that issue and see how, through the Chamber, we can support you in enhancing economic activity? And just final comment, when I speak about Bridgetown, it is not exclusive. It is merely to use it as an example, as a starting point, which can be scaled to other areas of the country as well. But you have a natural starting point.
Thank you, Lalu. You put a lot on the table. Let me say, first of all, that two wrongs don't make a right. the fact that the banks have not found it possible to reduce the cost of capital cannot in any way justify anyone in not reducing the cost of goods with the removal of NSRL. So let's put that on the table right there. Having said that, I'm very clear on my position with respect to the banks and access to affordable capital. But at this stage in time, we need to get through this period of dealing with the debt restructuring, and then we will fight the other battles that we have to fight. Suffice it to say, however, that lack of choice is the handmaiden of not being free. Barbados' inability to choose where it goes has come from that calcification of the arteries that I referred to earlier. And therefore, the international entities, and they haven't raised it with us mercifully, but the last government relied on the fact that the cost of concessions was one of the reasons that they removed a lot of those other things that were removed. If we are managing our affairs well, then we will use the policy matrix that will secure the behavior that we need to secure, that we know works. Now, you and I happen to know that tax concessions do make a difference to Barbadians. Tom Adams understood that. And Tom Adams put in place tax concessions for solar water heaters and tax concessions for credit unions. And in both instances, they have secured magnificently the growth that he anticipated that they would in the late 1970s when he put it there. As long as we can't fix what we are fixing here, we will not have the luxury to do what you would like to see us consider and do. And that's why I just want us to stay focused, let us get through and get us to the point where we regain the absolute freedom of that we need to make the choices that we must, because if not, those looking in from outside will believe that Bajans behave like every other person, or that Bajans have circumstances that can be paralleled, and you get the one-size-fits-all prescriptions. It doesn't work. So I take your point. Suffice it to say that not only that, my government is a government that will always be open to suggestions. We will look at them, but we also recognize that there are only 24 hours in a day, contrary to what some people may think, that we don't understand, and that we need first to get us to that point where there's absolute stability, and then we can start looking at some of these other things that we need to. You heard me talk about Bridgetown just now, and Speightstown, and Oystons, and Holetown, and the Glebe in St. George, and 6 Roads are all part and parcel of what we see as mini town centers that have to be developed. So we'll get there for sure, but let us just stay focused on getting past hurdle number 1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
Prime Minister, Williams Caribbean Capital recently launched a successful green energy bond to enable Barbadians from any walk of life to invest in the alternative energy industry. And I have every confidence that your Minister of Energy will sort out the rates and so on. So we would like to volunteer to refurbish the roof of whichever IDC building you choose with no cost at all to government, and cover it with photovoltaic. We'll cover it with photovoltaic panels and sell the electricity to pay for the cost of refurbishing the building.
Sorry, to sell electricity to pay for what?
To pay the cost of refurbishing the building.
Okay.
And we'll pay the IDC rent for the roof space as well to help pay the cost of running the school. that you're proposing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your generous offer. We look forward to other offers from others in the room. Let me say that, and you're absolutely right, Busy, that we have to think outside of the box. Look, in dealing with the issues of the Transport Board, people immediately jump to layoffs. But the first thing the Transport Board has also to do is to maximize the resources that it has. You have bus terminals, and this is not us alone. This is a case of opening up and talking with people in the sector. You have bus terminals that can effectively house photovoltaic panels, which can help earn money to reduce the cost of what it costs us to be able to deliver public transport in this country. So you're absolutely correct. We need to stop talking and just do now. Use the Nike approach.
Prime Minister, just get us the licenses. Just facilitate us to get the licenses, and we cover all the bus terminals too.
The only difference, Busy, as much as I like the letter B, I understand that there are 25 more letters in the alphabet. And therefore, since I do not believe in the letter C, which is consolidation, I have to make sure that we do it in a way that is the letter F, which is fair.
Go ahead.
Prime Minister, Busy Williams is an impossible act to follow. When you made your first presentation, well, almost probably the first one from the cabinet room, I think, you mentioned several contracts. You mentioned one in particular, Global Ports, and we all know in the public about Cahill. But you said you were turning up many agreements and contracts and things that the new government found itself tethered by. I'm not specifically speaking about individuals with contracts that were recently renewed. I'm speaking about the larger issues of what, say, with the Cahill project or with the Global Ports project, you may still be having to deal with. Will there come a time when you may be able to publish for the country as a whole a list of some of these major ones with the details summarized, and then what your options may be?
Yeah.
Because there may be many that we do not know about.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. The Attorney General, as I said, I think yesterday in the debate, and the public integrity legislation will definitely come back to the House, we imagine no later than October, but without prejudice to that, the ministers of government have all either already or are in the process of declaring their assets to be kept in a safe until the Integrity Commission is established. And I thank them for agreeing to do that in the absence of legislation, although it was a condition of the job. But we will have, as I said yesterday, a situation where the Attorney General is literally marshalling and keeping, not to pun, keeping a list of these projects. It was only a few weeks ago, for example, 2 weeks since that press conference, that I discovered about the contract for the building behind here, which never went to tender, which is 15 million or so plus VAT, and for which just under $5 million has been disbursed and spent already. Now, you understand, we keep discovering things and we have to manage them. So at some point, yes, the AG, I'll ask him to put it all together. Some of them we are still in the process of negotiating because, as I said, there's not a criminal penalty to everything. While that is the luxury for those who want to be totally driven by the Old Testament, I have to be driven by what contingent liabilities become real liabilities in a government and the extent to which it crowds out the space for the government to do what it has to do. And therefore there has to be a civil approach as well that will see people walking away from some of these contracts, and a person is not going to walk away if you're talking criminal prosecution. So in some instances there will be civil forbearance, if only to create the fiscal space. Where contracts have in fact been issued inconsistent with in breach of statutory requirements, we may be able to argue that they're void ab initio. But in some instances, there was a very scant approach to how procurement was treated. But then when you look at the terms and conditions that have been agreed to, I can simply tell you that the government can't afford it, cannot afford it. And those are some of the discussions that we are still having. And I reckon that that will take another few weeks, maybe a few months, to be able not only to negotiate away from liability, but in some instances to negotiate down on quantum, particularly where you have take or pay contracts that have been excessively generous from day one, in circumstances where the government's need is not that volume from day one, but may eventually become that volume in year 6 or 7. We should not be paying for that from year 1. So there's a combination of things and factors. Yes, Patrick? On Hilton. I want to update too. Suffice it to say that Hilton has not been a priority for me. And secondly, I think the minister is now putting in place the board for Needham's Point. And thirdly, that I think in the campaign trail, we made it clear that we do not believe in the sale of Hilton's freehold. Many of you in here have children and grandchildren. And I use as my reference point Tom Adams or Errol Barr getting into difficulties in the case of Mr. Barr, 74 to 76, in the case of Tom, 81 to 82. And if they sat in this chair where I sit and had decided to sell the Hilton, then it would not have been available for us as a generation to maximize its usage, even if we do a leasehold of 30 years, or even if we do a hypothecation of profits or something. It would not have been able to be available for us for use to help us out of a tight situation. So if they didn't do it, then why should I do it? In spite of the fact that I have no children, I respect the fact that you do. And I respect the fact that your children 30 or 40 years from now may have to manage a Barbados that might have a difficult situation, and there is limited resources available to us, and therefore let us maximize how we extract profit rather than simply believing that you just pick up something and sell. What do you call it, Ed? The mash up and buy back approach. So that's my approach to the Hilton. And in fairness, we've not taken a formal briefing.
Madam Prime Minister, Jim Reid, please excuse me for not standing. I'm recovering from a broken leg.
I hope you recover quickly.
I hope so too. First of all, thank you for a very inspiring speech that, for me, gives me confidence that we have a brighter future than we had a few months ago.
Thank you.
I'd like to raise 2 points. We are a Barbados manufacturer. We export to 18 countries. We've just won contracts in Suriname and Bahamas, bringing US dollars into the country. One of the actions you took in the first few days of your office was to cancel the debt payments. That put Barbados under watch. One of our country suppliers, we get supplies from 7 countries. One of them is Canada, and that contract for supply was underwritten by the Export Development Corporation, who have now withdrawn support for Barbados, which means we cannot get any credit terms from a supplier. We've got to pay up front. That's an extra cost to our business when we're competing with very cheap and I would say somewhat inferior products from China. So that's the first thing, that the law of unintended consequences has hit us hard.
That's easy.
Second
one. Can you repeat the last sentence? I'm not understanding.
The law of unintended consequences has hit us hard. You did what you thought was right for the country, and I agree with it. But the impact of that is to hurt a manufacturer here who can't get credit terms on a major supplier.
You mean from Canada?
From Canada, yes.
And that's understood because Canadian banks are the main 3 of the 5 banks in the country. You know, I want to speak very frankly to the people of this country, because we had a situation where every one of us watched on. We knew what was happening. We knew we were on the track and the train was coming. And we watched. I'm not going to say any more at this stage, but I just want us to reflect on those facts. If I have a nail job and I have a diabetic condition and I don't do anything about it, what happens? And if you don't take care of the foot in year 1 or 2, and it spreads to the leg, and you still don't do anything about it in year 3 or 4, you're at risk, if you are lucky, of losing it from your hip, and if you're unlucky, you're going to get sepsis, which is death. So I want us at all stages, as I move into, today is what day? Wednesday? Tomorrow is exactly 8 weeks from the date, to recollect that what we had to do is not just a few things, but it was major surgery. And there are very few people, certainly women with gynecological problems take longer than that, but there are very few people with serious cancer or serious life-threatening conditions that can get back up and walk without some consequence. So I am sorry, I appreciate the difficulty, but I'd like also to give you the confidence of knowing that in every case where a country has gone through debt restructuring, as long as they have taken the steps to undergo a resumption of fitness, that within 2, 3, 4 years, they access international capital markets again. Now, we don't want to do like those countries that went through debt restructuring, went back to bad behavior, and found themselves into a second debt restructuring. My commitment to this country is that we will do all that is necessary for us never to have to return to this moment in time. But we accept that there will have been, regrettably, some unintended consequences, because you can't literally live how we were living, miss death, and not expect to have some kind of pain or consequence that we were doing. Now, what I'd like to discuss with you is what other ways you feel that we can offset the other aspects of your environment that will give you a competitive advantage that you do not now have, that may be within our purview to give you. And I think if that's the approach we take, then we will get out of this area successfully together.
Madam Prime Minister, thank you. You have my support, and I would love to spend 10 minutes with you to give you some ideas about how we could help Barbados in general and the manufacturing sector in particular.
I'd love to, and believe you me, the government is also suffering from the withdrawal of the export development of Canada's positions. Good news is, though, that I leave you this afternoon and to speak to the Canadian government at a very high level.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I have one more point to make. It's a very short one. I'm putting on my hat as Chairman of the Green Committee of the Chamber of Commerce. We'd like to meet with your Minister, Mr. Abrams, and yourself if possible, because we have some ideas that can help us save money right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. As I said, they're now putting together the National Task Force for the 2030 targets, and I'm sure that you will want to feed into that too in a meaningful way.
Madam Prime Minister, thank you. Very good speech this afternoon. I want to touch on a subject that is of particular importance to me. Under my tenureship as president, the number one question the Chamber was asked month after month is about tax refunds. There's millions of dollars in refunds owed to various corporations in this country, including receivables for goods and services. Now, we had questioned Brown many times, and they didn't even have a basic system of first in, first out. It was the squeaky hinge gets the oil. Whoever makes the most noise gets a refund, which absolutely made no sense.
You sure that was the only criteria?
Well, Prime Minister, I've always
Remember,
been told if I can't
I don't know. I don't know. You were
either.
president of the chamber at the time, so you might be in a better position to tell me.
Prime Minister, if I can't prove it, I can't say it. So the other thing that was used quite successfully is a lot of these refunds were never certified. So we have members in this room who've had claims in there that go past 10, 15 years that in some instances have never been certified. So really I have a two-part question. One is when can we expect to see some of these refunds coming in place? And you will enlighten us on that. And two is, how can we expedite the process to have these things certified?
Well, to begin with, look, our commitment is first and foremost to try to start keeping current. We have said that we have to set up a unit on arrears. That's part of our phase 2 activities that we're now looking at doing. We've also tried to look, and in the budget, you know that I would have put a commitment to put $1 million, I think it was, extra to deal with the enforcement capacity at BRA. All of these things will now be done in phase 2. Phase 2 really starts from August, but we have to put ourselves in a position to recognize that arrears will take time. You cannot build up arrears to the tune of 19% of GDP and expect that they're going to happen overnight. So we're conscious. I want you to be assured that fairness will attend all of our actions. It will not be a case of the highest and biggest noise keeper or any other unreasonable or illegal criteria, but that we will recognize that there will be fairness and there will be an appreciation to averting bankruptcy or insolvency, because there has to be a sensitivity to keeping businesses alive as we do it. One of the reasons why we want the cash flow, and I know that Ambassador Maskell recognizes that by moving towards the fuel tax, that it gives us greater control over cash flow and consistency, and that has been one of the problems that government has had, quite frankly, in terms of its management of all of its finances, including arrears. So work with us and we'll work with you. Those who genuinely are in need first to avert bankruptcy or insolvency, we will treat to as a priority, and the Private Sector Association knows how to communicate with us. And after that, it's a platform of a little for everybody on the basis that a little with content is great gain. But we can't do all at once, Eddie. I'm fooling you.
We'll have one more question, I'm told, from the floor.
Madam Prime Minister, Anthony Brown.
Sorry, I just want to say to Eddie that when the unit is set up, it's also going to look at swaps and different other ways of being able to settle some of the debt. So it's not going to be a linear approach alone.
Yes, ma'am. Anthony Branker. We recently saw in the press some preliminary reports from the Auditor General which showed some significant hemorrhaging because of inefficiencies. And I wondered what strategies will be put in place, because we're talking about cash flow, we're talking about the cost of central government, we're talking about how do we curb this spending, and there are significant inefficiencies within our, our system. What plans are there to curb the inefficiencies that we have seen through the Auditor General's report?
Well, to begin with, thank you. To begin with, I've asked that every ministry start to review its processes Look, there's some things that we do in government. Yesterday I had about 5 meetings across different ministries, and it was clearly a case of asking after the 3rd meeting, is the tail going to continue to wag the dog? Okay, it can't work. And that there has to be leadership with respect to these matters. I'm not going to go into details today, but you have to be able, first and foremost, to verify your payroll. Very first thing. If you can't verify payroll, we have a problem. Okay? And if people are being certified as being there by supervisors, then we have a problem with them too. Okay? So that we're not going to have a situation of those kinds of things continuing. Secondly, you cannot belong to the same government in different departments and then tell me that you can't have access or you ain't talking to each other, because then you clearly want to work in a different government, in a different republic. So all of these things have bred to lack of communication, lack of verification, review of systems. All of these things have led to the inefficiency, some of which you see being reflected in the Auditor General's report, much of which doesn't even get there. So you have our commitment that we are going to review every area of government and to make sure that we are in a position to validate and verify what the taxpayers' money is being spent on. And we do it because we want to spend money on things that we know will make a difference to either Barbados' efficiency, its quality of life, its competitiveness, and its ability to be able to create a platform for growth and wealth for its citizens. Okay?
Thank you, Prime Minister. I was allowed the first question, so I'll take a little liberty with the last, and it's going to be a brief one. Is your timetable still set for a phase 2? And when will you be able to tell the public?
I thought you were going to ask me if my timetable is still set to be able to get into a few crop over events.
Well, I know I take that for granted. I'm hoping that you do find time to at least
I'm told
sleep
that
and rest.
some of the tents are finishing this weekend, so I'm going to have to.
You have to bring that timetable forward. Phase 2,
phase 2
budget
from August.
August?
From August. By the end of August, we need to start it. I'm looking at the head of the private sector. I actually received an invitation from the head of the BWU to speak to them on the 25th of August too for their conference. Look, we have to work right through. We need to settle the work program before the end of August. The execution of phase 2 and phase 3 will take place August to July next year on phase 2, and then July next year, that's 2019, to December 2020, phase 3, and effectively phase 4 is wrap up, clean up, January to June 2021. And we have to stick to the timelines. The best journey and the most efficient journey is one for which there's a roadmap. So we need to settle the roadmap before the end of August. But we need to understand that the journey takes time and that there are no beam me up Scotty moments from Star Trek.
Well, we certainly had a little bit of Sesame Street with playing on the letters of the alphabet that we like and don't like. I hope that by the time we get to phase 4, the initials MIA don't become the most hated initials in the lexicon of Barbadians.
Well, then
that's my personal wish.
If they do, I can assure you, as I've told my parliamentary colleagues, that they will go into an election with MIA meaning missing in action. Because I will not lead them. I will not saddle them with that burden. Look, this one is for Barbados. It's not about me, it's not about you. This one is for Barbados. And we're going to do the right thing. And I pray that God gives us the strength, the continued humility, and the spirit of partnership to achieve for this country what we know we must achieve, because this country has been good to us.
Certainly. Shall we stand and appreciate the words of our Prime Minister? I'd like to invite Mrs. Betty Baffert, the VP Finance, to deliver the official vote of thanks. Please be seated, Betty.
Thank you, Dennis. And first of all, I'd like to thank Prime Minister Mottley for graciously taking time out of her hectic schedule to come and be with us this afternoon. I believe that you have the full support. I know that you have the full support of the Chamber, Council and Executive, and I would like to extend that you have the full support of the private sector of Barbados as we move towards rebuilding Barbados. I'd like to thank Ed, our President, for delivering a very comprehensive, I thought, remarks this afternoon. It was an excellent speech. Thank you, Ed. Also to Dennis Johnson, not our moderator, but our host. I actually look forward to many more sessions like this where he can come and join with us. To Mauricio and your team from Rubis, thank you very much once again for the sponsorship of this event. Also to Jensen, I have no idea with all the faces that I'm seeing where he is. Thank you for stepping in at the last moment to provide any bandwidth and Wi-Fi connectivity so that we can go global, as our President was saying to us. Thank you to Lloyd Erskine Sanford Center. Thank you for Lloyd Erskine Sanford Center for the facilities, to the catering for the wonderful lunch, to the media for providing the support and for helping us to go global. Who have I missed? The Secretariat, Carlos and team. Thank you very much. This is, I believe, the largest luncheon that we have put on, so there's been an extra effort needed in order to get all the people in place. I know that we were having some discussions on how to fit more people in as possible. And most of all, I'd like to thank you for actually coming and sharing this afternoon with us. I think it was a very important afternoon, and I hope you all get back safely. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Well, I will have the final word, and I must say one of the things I've noted over the years is that Prime Ministers go into that office on Bay Street with black hair and leave either with no hair or very little grey hair. I'm noticing a sprinkling of grey already. I hope that by the time you leave, you don't look like Ed and I. That was what I meant. I'll see you at Club Over. Thank you. And thank you all. Thanks, Ed.
Great job. Very well.
Thank you, my friend.